Happy Sunday. Welcome to another episode of the Digital Orthodontist Live. I'm your host, Dr. Kyle Fagala. Why did I stutter on my own name? Dr. Kyle Fagala. I've said that a few times. I just got back in today from the Orthodontic Pearls meeting, the Mother of Pearls meeting out in Newport Beach, California. If there's anyone in here who was there, go ahead and wave at me. Maybe tell me that you were at that meeting. It was a fantastic meeting. Obviously, California is never that tough of a place to travel to. Had good flights there and back. I debuted a new lecture on the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Orthodontists. I did an okay job delivering that. If anyone's ever lectured, the first few times you give something, it's never that great. So just wait for me. It will get better as I give it more times. My colleague at Neon Canvas, Alex, he spoke. He did an awesome job. There were a lot of fantastic speakers, both orthodontists and vendors alike. It was really just a great meeting. Relapse played, so shout out to all the Orthodontic Pearls admins for putting that together. Really great meeting. And we're really at a period in time as an orthodontic profession where we have so many great meetings. It's really an awesome time to be an orthodontist, I think. But tonight, I'm very excited to have a guest that I've wanted to have for a very long time that I know will make for a very entertaining episode of this show. And we just did a pre-interview, and she was so relaxed and composed, and I think a lot of the things we're going to talk about are going to be honestly fantastic. So I'm excited to have Dr. Courtney Dunn tonight. She's the founder of the hugely successful Women in Orthodontics study group and also conference. We'll talk about both of those things. She and her husband Matt have a 4-practice location, practice twice, in Phoenix, Arizona. And then Courtney, of course, is a huge leader in our profession. She has a huge name. I'm honored to have her on the show tonight. I'm thankful that she agreed to do it. We're going to discuss, among other things, what happens inside the Women in Orthodontics group. Turns out I'm not a woman in the group. She's going to talk about that tonight. The challenges of working while pregnant. Once again, I've never done that. Obviously, that affects a lot of people, and I'm interested to hear what she has to say about that. Practicing with an orthodontist husband. Well, I practice with my wife, but and then how to manage a large 4-location practice. And then, of course, lastly, what Courtney's up to these days with the AAO. She's very active with the AAO. But first, let's play our theme song. Who's out there with us tonight? I see a lot of people logging in. Let's hang out tonight. It's Sunday. There's football on, but who cares about football, right? Is anyone out there? I wonder if there's anyone that this is the first time you have been a part of the Digital Orthodontist Live. You may watch it on podcast, but is this the first time you've actually been out there watching at the same time? Let me know if that's the case. Also, my coffee mug. I always do a coffee mug. Last time I did a tumbler, but in honor of Lance, who talked about resistance last time, I have resistance is not futile. It's actually voltage divided by current. So this is for all the nerds out there who took physics, and also in honor of Lance for his topic of resistance. Courtney, go ahead. If you want to go ahead and request to join, we'll get you on as I read your bio. So Dr. Courtney Dunn, and the founder of the Women in Orthodontics Study Club or group. She's originally from Phoenix, and Courtney attended the University of Michigan for dental school and orthodontics alike. After she and her husband, Matt, who is also an orthodontist, finished residency, she stubbornly decided to move back home and open from scratch, even though the orthodontic market in Phoenix was completely saturated and every orthodontist and dentist told her that she should go somewhere else. By following proven business and innovative marketing strategies, Courtney and Matt were able to build a highly successful multi-location orthodontic practice in a notoriously difficult orthodontic market. All right, so let's see if I can bring Courtney on here. I'm going to try and add her in. And we'll see. We're testing the technology here, as we do each time. It's connecting. There's Courtney. Let's see. Do we have her? I can't hear you. Let's see. Will it work?
Can you hear me?
I can now. Fantastic.
Okay, good.
I told you this is the high the tightrope walk that we always do on the show. But it's really great to have you on here. Thanks for doing this. How's it going tonight?
Great. I've been super busy all day, but it's almost over.
Yeah. It turns out that when you have successful and successful people who are leaders in our profession, it's every time they've always got a billion things going on. So thank you for squeezing one more thing in. I know you had some like mastermind meetings today and some things, right?
So I run some mastermind groups.
Always staying busy.
Online. So I had one from 8 to 10 and one from 4 to 6. So it's all good.
Fabulous. I was midair most of the day, which actually is like maybe the most relaxing time ever because you don't have your phone, and I choose not to connect to the internet just so I have like a few hours of just sitting there and maybe watching a movie or just sleeping. It's the best time on earth. I want to jump right into questions, and we're going to do, I kind of do these like 3 segments or 3 acts, as it were. The first one's going to be on being a woman in orthodontics, and then we'll talk also about some personal questions, and then we're going to end with some AAO, and I've got a doctor submitted question in there as well. So we'll just jump right in. I want to jump in with Women in Orthodontics Facebook group, and
Okay.
so you started it. I did a little stalking. May 4th, 2016. I'm guessing that was like right around AAO or after AAO, which you can maybe talk to that here in a second. It's actually the day after my birthday, for what it's worth. You have 2,200 members. I can also see that it's a very active group. It'll show me there's a lot of posts every day. But naturally, as a male orthodontist, I'm not in there. So I don't know what happens. And I think like a lot of men, I'm curious, of course. I have FOMO about everything. So I guess first, before we get to what happens in there, why did you start the group?
I started the group because I felt like there was a need for a place for female orthodontists to have a safe place for support to talk about anything and everything that was about their lives and about their practice and about orthodontics. So right now, I think it's like 30% of active AAO members are female, but like over 50% of residents are female. So we're getting to be this bigger and bigger group, and we just didn't have a group where we could kind of discuss some of the unique needs and challenges that we have as female orthodontists.
Sure. Yeah. So in terms of like the focus of the group, like what would an average, and again, this is like one of those questions, like, I think I'm like in every other group. I don't want to use the adjective to describe myself, but I'm in every group. Okay. Except for this one. So like what would the average day look like, I guess, in this group, and how is it different from other groups maybe?
So one of the biggest differences for women in orthodontics, besides the fact that all the members are women, is that I only allow female orthodontists in. I don't allow vendors. I don't allow team members. And so when it very first opened up, it was sort of everybody. And then I sent nice messages and kicked out all of the vendors and consultants and all of that kind of stuff, because I just felt like it was getting very, very personal in there. And I just didn't feel comfortable having anybody that wasn't an orthodontist or an orthodontic resident in there. So it is, it feels like a safe space for a lot of people because it is closed. I don't allow self-promotion. So if people start posting stuff about companies that they own, I will take it down. I will remove that. If people start posting, oh, I did this great clinical case, and they're kind of trying to bait people into taking their in-office course, like I won't allow that. So I'm kind of mean, but I want it to be, I want it to be like sort of, I want to have control over it, in that I want it to be valuable to people, and I want everything to be very transparent. And so, that's kind of what's different.
Well, I'll take up for you on one point that you made, that you're difficult, I think you said. I always say I'm particular. I'm particular.
There you go.
Yeah. That's a softer way of saying that. Anyone who's admin the group, I admin, of course, this group, and then I admin, like in a totally different way, a group for a drummer that I'm a big fan of. Random aside, cool. Because I had needed something else to do. But
so I have a really good friend who's married to a professional drummer.
Who's a professional drummer? Who's it? Oh, is it somebody I would know?
Keith Carlock.
Keith Carlock. I have to now. I just like
he drums for Steely Dan.
Really?
Yeah.
Steely Dan. He must be really good. Steely Dan is like famously respected in like the musical community. So
yeah, like drums is not the correct term, because like I'm friends with her, not him.
No, this is great. So I just learned something. I'm going to be like looking this guy up later.
Gotta look up Keith. Yeah.
Yeah. What I will say is that in any group that you admin, it's always its own difficult scenario of things and mixture of things, and people that post too much, or people that post things where they're baiting, or they're just self-promotional. And the point is that just like anyone else that's a producer on a television station, you're trying to foster a community that serves the purpose that you want it to serve. And you're going to ruffle feathers, and you're going to upset people from time to time. And so, I've had people tell me to take something down that I post. I was like, oh, my bad. So it's sort of like I'm in your house. And so I have to, kind of go by your rules, as it were. So I think that's okay. I think the worst group is one that is not, handled in that way, and it's not moderated appropriately. So, let me ask you this. Obviously, there's been some criticisms of a group like that. I don't think you do anything that's different, that's unique, that excludes a certain group. There's going to be criticisms, but I guess what are some of the common criticisms you've heard of your group?
I have had people personal message me who don't know me and call me a reverse sexist.
Okay.
Um, yeah, that was the biggest one. I hope most orthodontic women are not like you, was his final comment to me. Um, so that was pleasant. But mainly it's just, when I haven't been shy about stating when somebody says something that's maybe could be taken the wrong way by a female, and saying, that sounds sexist, or, that comment is sexist, whether you
Yeah.
intended it to be or not. And that ruffles a lot of feathers. I was at an AAO once sitting with a good friend of mine who I haven't seen in a long time. And she was talking about, her father's struggle with cancer. And then this woman comes up to us and just starts saying, hey, that group of men over there has been talking poorly about you for the last hour. And I just looked over there and I didn't know any of them.
Mm.
And so it was just kind of like, well, okay. And she's like, I defended you. And I'm like, okay, thanks. Like,
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
So I mean,
But
so I hate to hear that. First off, I think the problem is that you're able to meet people when you go to meetings that maybe you have not met yet, and maybe some of these people are people that you've had these online arguments with.
yeah,
And what I almost find, like, I mean, I don't know, 99 times out of 100, at least for me, and this may not be your experience, is that if I'm able to like talk to them, it's almost all of a sudden that I sense this like, oh, I can't hate him, or like, I mean, he's a person. I would think in the same way that these people are talking badly about you or talking badly about other people or whatever, they would only have a conversation they would see. I mean, I knew you from way back when at a
yeah,
consultant group we met, and I
yeah.
still remember that distinctly, meeting you and Matt at the same time, and like, oh, they're just lovely people. It's like, that's always been my thought of you. And so if I go into a group and someone's arguing, or I mean, we've had a thing where you messaged me about it, and I'm going to
Yep.
mention it, a giveaway that we did, and you said that it was sexist, or you had some issues with
So
it.
he was giving away a vacuum cleaner for Mother's Day. Like, I
Yeah.
was just like, no, you cannot
Well,
do that.
and I told you at the time, and this is why I bring it up, because I feel like there's a good conclusion to this. I hope is that was my team's idea. We were in this mode of kind of doing this like Chris Feldman, Ben Fishbein thing, and others have done it, but where
Yeah.
they're giving
Yeah.
away things and generating likes and engagement and things. It was Mother's Day, and so I let my marketing crew come up with it. They came to me with a Dyson vacuum. That was their answer. I swear. Okay, and I was like, sounds good to me. It did not cross my mind that was like making this sort of comment on domestic women. I mean, I get it now. It's, a woman can vacuum, so that was
Yeah.
not it.
Yeah.
And even worse, a gift for Mother's Day, right?
Yes.
And I still
Yes.
stand by that. It was something that I think that a lot of women would go over their head, that there was any of that sort of thing. And then there's some that would obviously be bothered by it. We had no one comment to us negatively, but you did. And I think the greater point of all this is that whether it's right or wrong or whatever, I have an opportunity to dismiss that immediately and be like, well, screw you. Like, it's not your right. Or I have the right to say, well, does she have a point? And whether I agree with it or not, I think the right thing to do in that case is to listen, to think about it, to take some time to think about it, and then respond
Yeah.
and say, you know what, I had not considered that. And I think what we did was, I think we still left it up. But I apologize. It's like it didn't cross my mind. And what have we done from then on? We've never given away a vacuum cleaner. I told you this in the pre-interview. We had a similar thing for Cinco de Mayo, where we had some mustaches and honest to goodness, like, it had never crossed my mind that was cultural appropriation or whatever. And the funny thing is about that is, I swear 5 years ago, I never heard anyone talk about that being bad. People would wear ponchos and go drink margaritas and do all that, put a fake mustache on. It never occurred to me, at least where I was living. And then all of a sudden it did. And I think it was actually Cliff Capus, whose wife is Hispanic. And
Yeah.
he wrote a post, and I was like, oh, well, crap, I've done that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we dropped the mustaches. Okay. We still give out chips and salsa. So I think it's really easy, certainly as a white male kind of majority, whatever, to respond to these things in a way that's healthy, I guess. And so that would be like one of the conversations I think we'll have is, how do we respond to these things? Because obviously men are going to feel threatened or feel defensive about
Yep.
things. And
Yep.
what's the right way to respond? So
Well,
we'll
yours
get
was
that.
definitely the right way to respond when it came to just, oh, I never really thought about it from that point of view. And
Yeah.
many times when I say something to somebody, that's really all I'm looking for, is look at it from,
Right.
the female perspective. Like, this is not coming off the way you think it is. The worst thing you can do is kind of double down. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. You're wrong. You're just sensitive. That's just counterproductive.
Sure. And so that's what you're after, I guess, if you were to call someone out. There's a question I wrote down as you were talking.
Yeah.
Like, what is the goal, I guess, in terms of, and I have my like pet things that I call people out on, that I'm very, and it's grammar related, but your platform is certainly more important. But grammar is very important to me. My mother was an
Well, my
English teacher.
daughter's English teacher would
Yeah.
disagree with me.
It's
She
very
thinks
important.
that's the most important.
Oh, human rights, grammar, whatever. They're in the same sentence, really. But I guess, what is it you're after? Like, what's the goal?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is just trying to see it from a different perspective. And just
Okay.
if somebody says something, like literally, I just want them to like step back and go, oh, because like I'm not perfect 100% of the time. Like I might say something that offends somebody and it's like, God, I didn't really mean to say it that way, or I never looked at it that way. And I think that that's what we need more in this world, more than anything right now. Everybody's so divisive, is to just, instead of just digging your heels in, maybe try to look at it from somebody else's point of view. And I think in politics and everything, if everybody would just stop just being insistent on trying to be right all the time and just try to understand. I actually just read this really, really good article about a political science teacher from New York who taught ethics in like the Appalachian Mountains or whatever. He wanted to see a different perspective because he's like, I'm always surrounded by these New York liberals who agree with me on 100%. And I want to see like these kids whose parents voted for Trump, who are really like just totally opposite of me. And he's like, mainly, he's like, I wanted to gain an understanding. I didn't want to prove to them that I was right. I wanted to understand where they were coming from. And I wanted them to understand where I was coming from. And if we can all just gain a greater understanding, like things could get a lot better in this world.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I like that.
It was a great article.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I think the goal is empathy. I think the goal is to be able to place your own feet in someone else's shoes and just sit with that. I spoke on the 7 habits, and one of the 7 habits is to seek first to understand, then to be understood, which is, I think, the inverse of how we all operate effectively with communication is. And doing an interview show, it's tough too. Like, I'm trying to listen, but I'm also forced to think about what I'm going to say next. But the right way to listen is to listen what he calls empathically, or empathetically, you could say, which is to really seek to understand and to share that emotion and then respond in turn. I think if we would all do that, I think it would be better. And certainly I'm no better than anyone else in those terms. But let me ask this as sort of like a kind of a follow-up, going on a little bit of tangent. This has been great so far. But I guess along the line rather of criticisms, one thing I worry about, to be honest, and I feel like I've noticed it, is I feel like because of that group and how great it is, and that doesn't bother me. It's great. I think it's fantastic. You can't blame anyone for wanting to spend more time in a group than another, because they do that because they like it, right? So,
yeah.
But I do feel like that in the co-ed groups, you called them in the pre-interview, I do feel like women are less represented. They're less active. Is that, you think, because women in orthodontics? You think that has nothing to do with women in orthodontics? Is that good? Is that bad? I'm going to talk about that a little.
I don't think that women are less active in the co-ed groups because of women in orthodontics. Like, I think that women have stated, in my group at least, that in a lot of the co-ed groups for a long time, like they would comment and be ignored, or they would post something and be ignored, or they would post something and then the response would be very condescending. And so, they just didn't feel like they could post things and actually get good feedback, or they were just going to be talked down to. And so they didn't post or respond as often. I was actually, because I knew this question was coming, I hate to break it to you guys, so I started like flipping through some of the groups, and I see that it's getting better. I think that admins probably realize this more. It may or may not have to do anything with me, that they need to be more open to other people commenting and other people bringing up other points of view. And so I did see a lot more women commenting on things, which is great, because like, I think every single one of these groups has a great purpose, and they're all different purposes. And so they're not in competition with each other.
Right. I agree with that. Well, I guess the thing I would say is that I want equal input from everyone. I feel very strongly that we need both men and both women engaging and interacting. And so I guess the natural follow-up question for me then is that what can those of us in these groups do to foster this equity, or this make this experience healthy for everyone?
Well,
Because
I
that's what I
think
want.
when somebody does comment, you do need to
Mm,
engage with that person. If they do happen to make a comment and they're not one of the cool kids that's normally like active in this group or whatever, not one of your good friends who's just sort of in that circle of these are the normal people that sort of talk, like engage with that person. Or if a woman posts something, like comment on her post. Like there are many times that I get, hey, I posted this elsewhere and got crickets, what do you guys think?
mm,
So for
yeah,
WEO, like with WEO, like there's no specific, like we're just a business group or we're just a clinical group. We have clinical cases, we have business cases, we have, things about work-life balance, we have things about dealing with parenting, there's just sort of anything and everything. But I think a lot of people are wanting to post in the other groups as well. I mean, there's great things to be learned in those groups.
yeah. Well, I think it's important. A couple of things you said that I want to respond to. That the groups aren't in competition. I think there was a. It's funny. All these groups that exist now came out of a time where there was almost this mono audience thing. So it's
Yeah.
like one
Yeah.
channel. I always talk about like TV. It's like back when there was one channel, and then there were three, and then there's cable, and now there's going to be more and more and more. So it does spread things out a little bit. And I think maybe as we've gotten more, there's maybe that like less competition. And I do see groups trying to work together and collaborate.
Hmm.
Jeannie Moody actually said, I can't read exactly her quote in terms of how to improve things, but I will paraphrase. Don't let people be a-holes was her answer.
Yeah. Yeah,
So for how
for
to make things.
sure.
And so I think it is a call to the admins because I really think it's the admins that maybe have the most control is to
Hmm.
rein people in when they are acting out of line, which I think
Yeah.
it's
And
contingent on the admin.
there's a really great TED talk by, let's see, her name's Dame Stephanie Shirley, and she created a software company in the 1960s, and it was an all-female
Mm,
team that came together. And she just said that you can always tell the what how does she say? You can always spot an ambitious woman by the shape of her head because it's flat on top from being patted patronizingly her entire life. And I think that you still see that a lot. And so people just need to kind of go, ooh, I shouldn't respond maybe quite like that. Like, oh,
mm,
honey, that's not how it works.
yeah.
Like, we're very much still spoken to like that. Not all the time, but enough
Right.
to just be like, you know,
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I mean, you hear stuff. I mean, there are lecturers that will come. I'm the president of the Dental Society, and that means I've been going to Dental Society meetings for 8 years or something. And there are speakers that will say things, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like
yeah.
they'll like actively hit on the young dentists in the room while they're lecturing, and it's just like it's not funny. I can only laugh because it's so absurd, but it's just like what are we doing? And it's just so. I think it's also contingent. So it's up to the admins to sort of set the stage and to police these things when they get out of line. And then it's also up to us to sort of self-police it and try and be better
Mhm.
people and be more understanding and so on and so forth. So, man, that was just one question with lots
Shoot.
of extras. Well, this is going to go all night. No, we'll speed it up. So I do want to ask kind of some unique issues that female orthodontists deal with. Again, it's really like selfishly, I want to learn tonight and I want the listeners to learn too. But I guess what are some things that are unique to female orthodontists, just in general? Like, what are some things that maybe we don't realize as men?
um I think you probably just don't realize all the things that are running around in our head, like as we're working all day. So if you think about like when you go to the office and you're having to deal with your team and seeing patients and marketing and all of that kind of stuff, you've got all of that stuff running around in your head, and it's really like overwhelming, right? Well, for women, like we also feel the pressure of having to run our household on top of it all. And even
Mm-hmm.
though we have men who are fantastic partners who are helping more than they've ever helped before in the past, we still feel this insane guilt and responsibility
Mm-hmm.
to do all the shopping, to plan the meals, to make sure that our kids are getting somewhere on time. Am I reading enough to my kid? Are they getting enough attention? Like this kid's got to get here, this kid's got to get here. Like my son went to the ER this week, and so it was just like, oh my God, like my son's in the ER and I'm having to see patients and I'm having to check my phone. And so there's just all of these other things that are happening that are on top of running the office. And so it's very difficult. And I mean, I know we're going to talk about pregnancy and stuff too, but that's also something that, your body's physically going through as you're actually running a practice.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've got 4 kids, and so and Anna does work in the practice certainly, and I think of her as my partner. Not this, she's not an orthodontist. I wish she was an
Right.
orthodontist. So it would be great if we could just magically do that. But she deals with a lot of guilt that I don't,
Yes.
and I don't know if
Yeah.
that's purely genetic or if that's cultural or it's probably a mix of the two. But it definitely makes things different. She has stresses that I don't consider and don't deal with. I do cook. I do some things. I'm not the
Oh,
best
my
husband
husband
ever,
does
but
so much. He does
you know.
so much of the dishes and all of that stuff. Like, and I'm not saying that men aren't taking
Oh,
on a
sure.
lot of responsibility. They sure are. But we do feel like this pressure to have to like
Right.
run
Yep.
a wonderful household and do all of those things
Yep.
on top of everything
Yeah,
else.
it's an extra anxiety, I think. Let's talk about pregnancy. You mentioned it,
Okay.
and so I think this issue has come up recently. If you follow politics, and the last thing I want is to talk about politics because people hate politics. But Elizabeth Warren, if you watch the Democratic primary debate, she mentioned this idea that she'd been fired for being
Hmm.
pregnant, or just that theme or that idea in
The five
general.
month mark. Yeah.
Yeah. So workplace discrimination based around pregnancy. So it's obviously it's on the national consciousness right now. But talk to me about the challenges that the female orthodontist goes through when they're pregnant. And before you do, I'll just say I went to dental school with a girl named Cheryl, and she was like one of the hardest working people I knew. She literally worked in the dental clinic, I think the day up until she had her baby, and then she was back 2 days later. And I was like,
Yeah.
Cheryl, you're like, she had to sit so far from her patient because her belly was so big. And I was just like,
Yeah.
that was like my first like realization of like, my goodness, this is wild. But tell me what your experience has been like, and let's talk about that a little.
Well, it's really interesting because you kind of go back to residency. There was a post that I put in our group about this because I really think that it's something that everybody should be talking about more often, is that I miscarried when I was in residency.
Mm-hmm.
And the worst part about miscarrying when I was in residency was the fact that I couldn't tell anybody that I was pregnant because all of the faculty members thought it was horrible for women to have babies when they were in residency, that they were basically a waste of space, that they put undue pressure on the professors for like trying to finish up theses, and that's not correct grammar.
Theses.
Theses, trying to get their theses done, taking
Yeah.
time off to recover from their birth.
Sure.
So I basically miscarried and went back to see the same day I was back in the clinic. I couldn't tell anybody. I couldn't tell anybody what was happening to my body, why I was upset. I had to kind of pretend I wasn't upset. And kind of going through that pain. And like, there was a lot of judgment even from other residents of why would you get pregnant? Did you even plan this? That kind of thing. So like, I couldn't say anything to anybody except for somebody else that I knew who had had miscarriages during residency and who had also kept it a secret.
Hmm.
So I'm literally hemorrhaging while I'm seeing patients. And I will tell you that there are tons of female orthodontists who can share that story of you're literally losing your pregnancy and you're seeing patients. And I think that maybe it's not something that maybe you think about if you're a male because your body doesn't physically go through that. I know women who had been put on bed rest who are still going and seeing patients who are just like, wheel me to the next one, wheel me to that. I got to keep the business going. Like the thing is in the end, you have to keep the business going. And so many women don't take much time off after they have their babies. They have their babies and they're back 4 days later and they might be part-time. And this is some of the things that some of the people post in my group is just sort of, how did you manage your maternity leave? What did you take off? And some people took off 4 to 6 weeks and found somebody to cover for them. Some people took 2 to 4 days and were back working. And I think it's really incredible. And if you picture what your wife went through 2 to 4 days post delivery, and then picture her putting clothes on and seeing 100 patients.
Yeah.
And that is where I think that like women deserve a ton of respect. I wish it was different. I wish we didn't have to go in so quickly. And I'm lucky I had my husband to help me when I had my third child. But when I was in residency, I took 2 weeks off. My co-residents covered for me for those 2 weeks, and then I was back.
Yeah.
And so I was basically like, they were basically like, you got to be back or you repeat a year. So I was back.
What should be the amount of time?
Oh my gosh. That's a political question for sure. I mean, in an ideal situation. So with Patrick, I took 6 weeks off and it was like heaven for me. But I think it was like heaven for me because I had taken 2 weeks off with Grace.
6 weeks off would be like, oh my gosh. Yeah.
It was, but I mean, like Matt covered for me and I had
Right.
Patrick in the summer, like talk about like the worst family planning.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and our first was born in July, and it was tough. We've seen her 9 months pregnant, walking around the South, and gosh, Arizona's not any better, so a little less humid.
Well, I'm just talking about the office was so busy, so I mean, he was just having to like cover all of those patients.
Oh, the summer, sure enough.
Yeah.
I thought you meant the heat. I mean, I think of the heat when I see pregnant women in the summer. We had a team member that she had her second, and it was this summer, and just walking around in the heat, I was like, man, I feel so bad for you, Grace. Like, I know this is not easy. I see Feldman bringing up another kind of point along similar lines. I guess, quick question you can answer as I'm kind of reading what he said here. Do you know of any residency programs that give more than 2 weeks, or that give what you would say is appropriate, which is 6 weeks?
I honestly, so it's funny because, so my doctor was basically like, you are allotted at least 12 weeks. Like, that's what your legal right is, and I will write a letter and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, that's the last thing I need to do is cause trouble. Like, I do not want to get kicked out of this program or have my, instructors hate me.
Did you believed him? Was it a man, your program director?
My program director was great. I will honestly tell you, because Lyle Johnston was my program director, and he was like one of the few that was extremely supportive of me. When I was pregnant, he's got this like reputation of being so scary and stuff. Lyle was very good. He was not really a problem.
But you felt pressure from other.
Lots of pressure.
Yep.
Lots of pressure. Lots of pressure. So it was just. So I really don't know, and I know there are a lot of women who are having babies during residency now.
Sure.
So they're probably. I'm old now. I've been out of residency for a while. I've been out like 15 years. So God willing, it's changed.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any residents.
Female classes.
I mean, the University of Tennessee, I don't want to say this wrong. I think I saw Dr. Claro's in here watching. She's at UT. Great school. I love Tennessee, right? I think they had their first class of all females this year, or the year before, something like that. So that's pretty cool for Tennessee. Again, it's the South. I mean, there's the idea that it's going to be kind of backwards, whatever, but it's been half female or all female. Well, just being honest, it's the thought. I think of anyone that doesn't live in the South. I don't think that's always true, but I think that's really cool.
Tennessee was my second choice. Michigan was my first.
I think traditionally they're pretty similar, and I think maybe still today they're similar. Maybe we do less tweed now or whatever, but Michigan, great school. Tennessee, love the school. I'm interested if there's anyone. Mayo gave me a month with my daughter. I was grateful, and then in practice, I can only take 2 weeks. So it sounds like Mayo did 4 weeks. I just would be interested if there's any residents as we keep moving through this. I'd like to know what that is, and I'd like to seek to change it. Now, what Chris brought up, I think, is as the male orthodontist, and maybe even as a female, well, not maybe, definitely as a female orthodontist too, you're going to have team members that get pregnant. I think we had 4 or 5 in the same year last year or something. So we were very intimately aware of what it's like to go through that. He said that I see many orthodontists gripe about employees getting pregnant. I think right off the bat, not a good look. He said we should celebrate this instead of feeling sorry for ourselves that we'll be short-staffed. I agree with all that. What's appropriate then for your team? 6 weeks?
They take about 6 weeks, but I mean, I think legally they're allowed to take up to 12. But I mean, like, I don't think that we're big enough still. Like, even though we have 4 locations, we work really hard on our overhead. So, FMLA doesn't apply to us because we don't have however many employees, but most of them take 6. I had an employee who had twins who was like my second employee, my very first assistant. And she took off more time than that. And I was just grateful that she came back, even though she only came back part-time. I was just super grateful that she came back at all. So, it's, we kind of have them sign a contract because when it comes to like, well, your medical coverage is like, you're going to have to be responsible for some of your medical coverage and this and that. And so we kind of have them sign a thing, kind of letting them know they're taking medical leave and what's involved in all of that.
Well, I think what I would say from my perspective is that birth is maybe the greatest miracle of life, and to taint it with, making someone have to stress about their job, or their place in a residency is one of the worst things you can do. So let's get better at that. And so I'm glad to bring awareness to that. So I do have a doctor submitted question from Jonathan Nicozisis. I think he's the biggest fan of the podcast. So hello, Jonathan. How are you? I don't know if the Eagles are playing, or they are playing. I don't know if they're winning right now, but maybe he can update us. He brought up Anne-Marie Slaughter, who I was not familiar with, but I read her Wikipedia, and it was like, what didn't she do, basically?
Yeah.
But she was a famous lawyer and political scientist, and I think Jonathan maybe treated her kids or something. But she wrote an article for The Atlantic entitled "Women Can't Have It All," and I didn't know this, but you told me in the pre-interview that you did a lecture on this, which, how convenient. But basically, what she's saying is that there are pressures that women have in balancing career and family. And I guess my question is, do you think it's true that women can't have it all? And how do you do all that you do? Because you do a lot.
I think it's true that women can't have it all. But in some ways, it's women can't have it all and do it all alone. I am huge in that you need as much support as humanly possible. I have a full-time personal assistant that helps me at home, and also helps me in whatever I need sort of outside of home. So yes, I have 3 kids who, one of them's an elite competitive swimmer. I can't drive her to her practices and stuff. I finally gave up and said, like, I would like to have it all, but I can't do it all alone. And my husband was the one who actually told me this. Basically, like, you are driving yourself crazy. So somebody else does my grocery shopping, somebody else cooks the dinners, somebody else does all of the laundry, makes the beds, cleans the house. Like, it's just, I can't do it all with what I need to do. And so I kind of gave a talk about this, of sort of how I schedule my day, how I try to get everything done. But I use this example, and it's not mine, of a juggler. And, a woman's a juggler, and she's sitting there and she's got all these balls in the air. And like, at different points in your life, some of the balls are rubber and some of the balls are crystal. And you know that those crystal balls have to stay up. But the rubber balls can be let go, and they will bounce back eventually. And so you just kind of have to have, like, what's my most important priorities right now? And those things can change. They can change month to month. They can change quarter to quarter, just depending on, you're talking about your personal life or your office or things like that. What balls can bounce and what balls would shatter if you dropped them. And so you just kind of have to look at it like that. But I think the 1980s, I'm old once again, I was born in 76. So the 1980s were very rough for women, I think, because it made you just like think that you could do it all. Like, you were this tough business person with the big shoulder pads, and you were going to be able to raise your kids and have a high powered job and do all of these things, and you could do it alone. And I think now that we're, in the next millennium, that we're kind of saying, you know what, you need to have a little bit of balance in your life. You need to be able to say, I can't do this, or I won't do this. Women really need to learn how to say no, and, figure out what are those crystal balls for you right now, and what are the rubber ones that can kind of bounce.
Yeah, I love that. I may steal that. So thank you.
It's a good one.
I talk about the Eisenhower matrix and how there are things that are urgent and not urgent, and important and not important, and things like shopping, or cleaning your home, or doing laundry, or some of these things that are assumed female tasks, to be fair, or mother tasks, or whatever you want to say. It's not important that you do it yourself. It's important that it's done, but not important that you do it yourself. And so in that way, it's a rubber ball, as it were. And so those are things you should delegate. That's what the Eisenhower matrix would say. And that frees you up for time in those quadrants that are important and urgent, or important and not urgent. So I'm all about, I think balance is like one of the most important things. I try to speak on that very topic as much as I possibly can, obviously from a little different perspective, but that's great. Love it. All right, let's move into this. Last question in our women's section has taken almost 40 minutes. It's fantastic. This is the good stuff. So Women in Orthodontics Conference. Tell me real quickly, I guess, when is it? Where is it? Who's going to be speaking, and all that good stuff?
So it's January 24th and 25th in Scottsdale, Arizona. Men are allowed to attend the conference. The reason we have the conference is not to just, oh my gosh, there's another conference. It was really important for me to create a conference where we have basically an all-female lineup. And the all-female lineup is predominantly made of people that you wouldn't normally see on the speaking circuit. So it's giving opportunities to women who want to speak or women who have an important story to share. And I may have determined that they have an important story to share with the certain ones. I had to kind of convince them, like, oh, you don't really want to talk, but like, you're so wise, please share your story. And so it's an opportunity to hear fresh new material from amazing people that you wouldn't hear anywhere else. And so it really is kind of part of what I've kind of set up for whatever my legacy for the profession is, just to give women an opportunity to take the stage and share their stories. And so we'll have clinical, we'll have business, Jeannie's talking, balance is BS. So she's going to talk about work-life balance a little bit, but it's not all work-life balance. Like, there's lots of incredible things. Shafina Chachor is bringing a pediatric dentist that she works with. She's not partners with, but she works with closely. And they're going to talk about ortho-pedo relationships and how to build those relationships and how you can get a great referral source out of a pediatric dentist. And you're going to hear it from the pediatric dentist, who's also a female. So, I'm super excited. It was a very, very special environment last year. Just amazing things were being shared, and I'm very excited. And Ben Fishbein went last year, so
I saw Ben was there. Yeah, I felt guilty I wasn't there. It's actually the same weekend as the Mid-South Mission of Mercy, which I'll be at.
You can never schedule a conference that doesn't have a conflict.
Oh, no, I'm not saying it like that. I'm just saying that's my excuse. I'm the president of the Dental Society. I will be doing free dental care. But it's a great meeting. It looked great. Ben said it was awesome. It's wioconference.com. I'll plug it again later on in the interview, and hopefully some people will sign up. Let's shift into some personal questions. And thanks for answering these questions. You're taking it in stride like it's no big deal, which is what I expected. I will say another update on Tennessee. Dr. Clara, I said she was here. 4 weeks is what they get. So I think
that's awesome.
Yeah,
4 weeks
that's
is
good.
that's amazing.
Yeah,
I had to pump, so my oldest daughter, for the first 6 months, she had breast milk only, no formula. I was very, very proud of that. But they had no place for me to pump. So I had to use an unlocked room and just pray people wouldn't walk in on me. And I felt so bad because one of my co-residents did walk in on me, and he was single and didn't have any kids. And no single man should ever have to witness that.
No. Yeah. That's one of those things, neither party is excited about this moment. So
he was like, oh my God, Courtney, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, I'm so sorry for you. You should never have to witness.
One of those realities of life you wait on as a man. Yeah, you wait till you're married. Yeah. So I mentioned this in the intro, and I don't want to minimize who you are by only talking about female topics. I think that is sort of, it's the thing you're best known for, and so that's why we start there. But you're also super successful. You've got 4 practices. You started from scratch, so I don't want people to lose that. I'm someone who also started from scratch, so I have a natural affinity towards others who did the same. But you did it in Phoenix. Memphis is not a softball market, but Phoenix, my goodness, that's that's a top 5, top 10 tough market. So I guess first, give us a quick profile of your practice, and then we'll ask you what it's like managing it.
So we actually set out to be a 1 location, 2 doctor practice. We sort of scoped out the the ideal place to open, all things considered, right? Yep. And so you're giving me a little bit too much credit. So we started 2 of our offices from scratch, and we purchased 2 of our offices. So
it still qualifies.
Half of it. So our very first office was completely from scratch. And about a year later, we purchased our second location. One of the practitioners out here had a heart attack and died. And his practice came for sale. And it's kind of a long story on how we kind of ended up with it. But so we purchased that one. And then it was a long time before we added the 3rd location. We were pretty happy with the 2 locations. And then this 3rd location kind of came up. There were 2 general dentists in the area. They had this small space, and it was just sort of like, oh, this is just the perfect location. And we've got these 2 GPs who really want us in there. So we opened that one from scratch. And then just 5 months ago, we purchased our 4th location that was an existing practice. And I think we had the 3 for 5 years before we decided to go ahead and jump on the 4th. And I think some of it is just, we get really stimulated by the work. it's exciting to run practices. It's the business part of it's really fun. And I'm a little ADHD. I mean, my kids have it, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, they got it from me. Like, I can't blame Matt on that at all. It's 100%.
Yeah, it's not Matt.
my
Matt's
side.
very, very focused, right?
No, it is
No.
is 100%
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And so, but he gets stimulated by that too. So it's just
Sure.
kind of like, oh, okay, let's do it. It ended up being more of a challenge than we had anticipated. But yeah,
So
so
let's talk
that's
about
kind
that.
of where
Like,
we are right now.
like the challenge of it. Like, what is it like managing 4 practices? I've had 3 at a time. We ended up actually closing one because I felt like it was life
Yeah.
was too out of balance, and I'm just focused on 2
Yeah.
now. I don't know that by myself. I would say this to a single doctor. This is my opinion. Anything more than 2 locations is tough. So you've got 4 and you got 2 between the 2 of you,
Right.
of course.
So it's kind of the same.
Yeah, well, maybe. Yeah, that's kind of you to say. Having 4, I think at the level you have it that's a lot. But I guess I would say this is this a model you'd recommend to other doctors? And what are some of the challenges, I guess?
It's not really a model I would recommend. I mean, I think like in Phoenix, if you want to hit a certain level, when it comes to kind of production, you have to have multiple locations. It's just the way it is.
Right.
You know, I think in an ideal situation, having a really big one office practice is the best way to go.
Sure.
In our location, that's just not feasible. So it's, it's just kind of the reality of what it is. I think the biggest challenge for us is, we ask a lot of our team. Our team travels a lot with us. And so I think that's very difficult on them. And we recognize that it's very difficult on them. I'm now having to work 4 days a week, which I've been working 3 days a week for so many years. And so having to work 4 days a week now, is not fun. But it's fine, honestly. My kids are getting older, so it's really, the only part that sucks is like now I'm working on the days where my daughter like has her high school swim meets, and I kind of always used to be able to be there, and now I can't be there, and I can only be there to kind of pick her up and take her home, where, I like watching her swim. It's fun, and I only have a couple more years with her before she goes to college. So, but I mean, there are things. My husband's he's brilliant. And so he really has a lot of like incredible systems. But I mean, in the end, like we have one website, we have voice over IP phones, we have cloud-based software. So a lot of our systems are very easy to put in multiple locations because it's all just sort of there. I think one of the things that's tough is just marketing in all of these, we're all in Phoenix, but it's funny, just, certain patients, really are interested in this ad, but they're like offended by this ad and the other location. So it's not like you can just run the same kinds of marketing in the 4 locations and it pulls the same kinds of people because, each neighborhood sort of behaves a little bit differently. And so some of your tried and true in one location might not be tried and true in the other locations. And so you kind of have to like learn the personalities of the people that sort of live in those areas. And that can be tough when you're kind of trying to break into a new market.
Yeah, it is funny when we had the 3, they're very distinct in their differences.
Mm-hmm.
And two of them are in suburbs that are, adjacent. And so you would think they'd be similar, but they're not similar. And then the other one was in the Midtown area of Memphis, which is, where all the hippies live. And, the people.
I bet you got some interesting questions there.
Not escape to the suburbs. Oh, I love it though. Like people watching is like my pastime. I love it. So I love all interactions with all people. It's like the joy I think of orthodontics is really all the fact that we get to engage with that many people in a single day and get paid like what we get paid to do that is like the greatest thing. I love the diversity of people and all the conversations you have. And when people are super weird, that makes my day. So in Midtown, it's very different. But yes, you have to approach it differently. You have to approach the consult room differently and things like that. So I guess quickly, in a few words, let's say, what are the couple of things that you feel like have made you and Matt successful in your practice? That's a big question. That's not like a 2-word.
That is a big question. Yeah. The biggest thing that helped us in our practice was the Great Recession.
Not an expected answer.
There you go.
Yeah.
Bam.
Yeah.
That was the best thing that ever happened to us, and it was the worst thing that ever happened to us all at the same time.
Yeah.
It was basically a year to a year and a half into starting our practice that everything crashed.
Wow.
And I do talk about this in a little bit in a couple of my lectures and stuff, but in 2009, over 100 dental offices in the greater Phoenix area closed. So it's not like, oh, you know, we struggled or whatever. Like dental offices don't fail. People. Like 1 year, like 100 offices closed. But it made us kind of take our heads out of our butts and kind of really get good at business really fast, because we had to make some very tough decisions, and we had to figure out what was going to work under extreme circumstances. And I think that I so appreciate my experience at Michigan and all of my instructors at Michigan. And maybe that didn't come out when I was talking about my miscarriage, but you know, Phoenix is a different market than Michigan. And so, you know, I kind of came out of school with just hang up a shingle and do good work and people will come to you. And that just isn't the case in Phoenix. And it sure wasn't the case in Phoenix during the Great Recession. And so we had to really figure out how to be business people at that point. And I am very grateful for the fact that we learned it early in our career, even though it was a very tough lesson.
Yeah, I think some of that, it's also in just starting a scratch practice. Like, you have to learn to eat beans and rice in a way. And I think that's, man, it's been helpful for me. At the same time, man, I would have loved to have found a practice I could have bought and just got started coming along. But, and if I were to start like another, I'd be looking to purchase. I think that's a normal way of going about things. But let's shift, let's shift into this. I wanted to talk about you and Matt, but I know we've got to kind of shift on. Dr. Anish Gala, I know his name. I went to school with Anish. He was asking the same thing about he and his wife and working together with another doctor. I guess let's talk about it just a little bit. I hate to just skip over it. How do you guys make it work?
Well, I'm going to give an hour-long lecture about working with my husband at WIO.
Well, then maybe we should just bookmark it and you'll talk about it then. I guess give a quick elevator pitch then on how you make that work.
I think the biggest thing that to make this work, I mean, and it's just like in any partnership, but the biggest thing is you owe it when you're working with your spouse. You always need to remember that the number one thing that you have for each other is unconditional love. And like in every single thing that you have to do, you always have to remember, like, you love this person no matter what. And like, you have to drop like any judgment against that person. You have to drop any blame. Like, you cannot blame them. You cannot resent them. Like, this is your family. And like, above all, family is the most important thing. And so I think people get really frustrated with their spouse and they forget that they love them. Like, and I think that you have to come back to that and accept each other for who you are, faults and all. I mean, like my husband, like we studied together in dental school, but like if we had a test, he needed to, and my daughter is the same way, he needed to study like 2 weeks in advance. For me, I was like, the day before, I'm good. Like I got it. And we got the same grades, but it was just different personalities. But like, if I didn't respect the fact that he would be super stressed out if he didn't study for 2 weeks in advance, and he didn't respect the fact that I didn't need to do that, then it wasn't going to work out. So, you know, you just really, you need to have that deeper understanding of who that person is, you know, at their core, and just have that unconditional love. Like, and then it really is the best partnership you could possibly have, because nobody's ever going to have your back like your spouse.
Yeah. So I don't have my spouse as a doctor or, you know, a partner, but effectively a partner. I mean, it's Ann and I that have started this and run this, and I love practicing with my wife. I mean, it's really like the only business partner you can have that you have that level of relationship with. It's really, it's great. Because I mean, a partnership is a marriage in its own way. And now you only have to have one marriage, you know, because you're already married to the you know, so I think it's great. I do think you sort of alluded to this, but I think, and this is maybe now this is becoming marriage counseling maybe, but understanding the personality differences. So whatever personality test you want to take, Colby or DISC, or now the Enneagram thing is really big. You need to understand what those differences are in a working environment, and you need to be okay with it. So for Anna and for me, the biggest difference is I'm a 9 fact finder. If the Colby test, I know you're familiar with that. For some people are probably. She is like an 8 or 7 quick start. So it is to say that I need to research things very thoroughly until I'm comfortable with it. She's okay, kind of like, whatever. The example I always give is if I'm going to order socks, okay, not a big deal. I'll spend an hour researching the socks, and I'll find the socks with the best reviews and that sort of thing. She'll just buy some socks and be done with it. So I think one of those mindsets is healthy, and it's not mine. But anyway, you need to know that if you're going to go
Oh,
into
I
that.
was a runner, so
Yeah.
socks can be
Well,
very
thank you.
important.
See, yeah, you feel me. I get it. Yeah, this is good. I think that, yeah, unconditional love, that's a great answer, better than my answer. And so I would say this classical idea that you can't work with your spouse, I reject, and I've never really understood that. Like, I don't think, and maybe I'm naive, but I mean, we've done that for 6 years now, but I don't think our team is bothered by it. There's also like other doctors that have never done that or never crossed that Rubicon, as it were. They're like, oh, that's not going to work. It must be terrible. It's like, I really like it. Like, I don't know. So I feel like we had this shared experience. Like, so I wouldn't trade it
Yeah.
for the world. So if anyone's not doing it because of other people saying that it's bad, I think Courtney and I might say, I think you should try it.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't work out, well, then she can stay at home or he can stay at home. So, all right, so let's do this. You can get different practices or whatever. So we're going to shift into this. And I'm just going to read how I wrote this. Like me and many other leaders in our profession, you are opinionated and outspoken. That was my political way of saying that. No, you're an opinionated person. You've ruffled feathers.
Yep.
You would admit this.
Yep.
And to be clear, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. Okay. I think we need people that are opinionated. I think there's a good way and a bad way to ruffle feathers, right? As long as there's a noble purpose in it, I think it's okay. But along those lines, what do you feel like is people's biggest misconception about you? I think we've already talked about some of this, but and do you think they only react to you in the way they do because you're female?
I think that the people's biggest misconception is that I'm like anti-male, and I'm not anti-male just because I'm a feminist or just because I'm pro-female. I mean, you don't have to be, just like, somebody you're just a reverse sexist. I'm like, okay. I'm just not. I'm I love my husband. I think he deserves the same rights as I do. I'm raising a son. And I think that it's my responsibility to raise like an amazing man for this world. So like, I feel a deep responsibility for, men having a wonderful experience in this world, just as women do. I mean, it's just, I'm not anti-male just because I am pushing for more rights for females. Yes, I think people react to me differently because I'm female. It's really interesting. Lean In had a really interesting infographic about gender bias in elections. And it was really interesting, just sort of like, if you're watching the elections, and I'm not getting political, I promise.
No, it's just fine. I'm familiar with some of this too. But go ahead. No, you're great.
Yeah, so if you're watching the elections and you say like, I don't like her voice, like, what are you really saying? Like, would you ever say that kind of about a man? Or I feel like she is too opinionated. Like, would you say the same thing? Because many people who say she's too opinionated and she's too assertive, like a lot of people find that attractive in men, like, wow, he's really passionate about what he stands for. And so there is that double standard out there. And I think once again, just everybody just needs to take a step back and say, I'm reacting, strongly against this person. Like, could it potentially be a gender bias? And, I think that a lot of it really is because you're just not used to a woman calling you out on stuff, and you're just not used to a woman just kind of just telling it like it is.
Sure. Yeah. I think the classic one is when they question a woman's ability to be a president, it's like, won't she be too emotional in her decisions?
Yes.
And I think perhaps we've proven that might affect men as president as well. So
yes.
Yeah, I think a lot of those things are pretty silly and, and so on and so forth. So well.
So look for that infographic. Go on to Lean In,
yeah.
And look for that infographic. It's really interesting to kind of just make you go, oh, because it's not that I don't have that feeling too. Like, why are we judging her outfit and not judging, his outfit or whatever? I mean, because basically it's just always the same, just a different tie. But like, you know what I mean? Like, so I mean, we all have those biases of, oh, she's irritating to me, or like the thing that I like, she's unlikable. Like,
right. Well, I think this is, maybe it's a tangent, but I think some of these things are so culturally ingrained, assumptions that we make of women in power. One of the stories that comes to mind, please don't take this the wrong way. It was a black man explaining how he realized how deeply cultural these feelings of racism or discrimination are. Is that he was getting on a plane, he noticed that the pilot was a black man, and he had a worry for a second about that, just because of how deeply ingrained racism is in our culture. And so he uses that as a really powerful example of, oh my gosh, like I even had that like racist response. And so I think the same is true. So I think we have to cycle through these things until we can be beyond that. And the example I always give is that if my grandpa is a huge racist and he says words that should never be spoken, then maybe, you know, his son or his daughter think those things, but they don't say them. And then perhaps then their son or their daughter don't even think those things. And then the next generation's not even aware of them. That's the hope. And so there has to be a period of time that you talk about these things and that you engage in them, and you force people to go from, as we're speaking in the pre-interview, on this spectrum of 1 to 10 in terms of awareness. There's always a spectrum. And I think a lot of us that are isolated from a lot of this are on, you know, 1 or 2. And so the goal is get me to a 5 so that my kid can maybe get to a 6 or 7, you know. I think that's kind of like what we're after. It's progress. So let's jump into the last section if we can. This will be on the AAO. And you've been critical of the AAO in the past. And so I think the biggest criticism is that they don't have enough female speakers. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look down the little docket and see not that many females on the docket. And to be fair, most of the females that are on the docket are consultants, and it's sort of like in the staff lecture. And so I would give you this credit, that I think the degree to which there are female speakers on not just the AAO, because it has increased, but also at the individual, like, you know, regional meetings and at the orthodontic pearls and entrepreneurs, all those sorts of, like, whatever you call those meetings, like group meetings. I think you've been the reason why there are more females on that, among others, but I think that's really your thing, and I applaud you for that. But when you look at the AO, the ratio is still well beneath, you know, 50-50 for sure. And so what can be further done to improve this other than talking about it?
I think talking about it is huge. I'm on a special committee for women orthodontists for the AAO, and they are trying to increase the number of speakers. But, you know, really, I think there just needs to be, like, just almost just the crowds just sort of yelling out for it. Like, we need these people. Suggesting people, I think, would be very, very helpful, because I think sometimes the AAO just kind of goes, well, who do you want? Like, I mean, that's just sort of the biggest response that we get. Like, okay, you want female speakers. Well, who do you want? But like, just tell us. But so the special committee that I'm on sent out a letter to all the female faculty members of all the residency programs, asking them to please speak. But they were kind of looking more for, like, the scientific lectures, you know, just saying, like, if you have something interesting to say, please, like, you know, offer it up. And I think people appreciated getting those letters. I don't think they got a huge response, but I think they're planning on sending them every year. But I think there's amazing people. That's why we have the WIO conference, right? There's amazing people out there that the AAO is totally unaware of, that are getting an opportunity to speak. And I don't think that these doctor scientific lectures necessarily need to be research-based, although if people have interesting research that they want to present, I think that's awesome. It's totally great. But I think that they're just dying for some suggestions. The AAO, once again, like, they just don't get it sometimes. So they, like, put up this, well, we put a little, like, speaker, if you want to be a speaker thing, fill out this stuff. And it was the most complex form I'd ever seen in my entire life. Like, so it was just basically asking for volunteers, but I got through half of it and said, I give up. Like, literally, I'm like, forget it. Like, I guess I just will never speak at the AAO, because, like, this is way too complicated. Like, it was ridiculous when it's like, okay, people have heard of you, Kyle, and all of a sudden you're speaking at the AAO, but I have to fill out this form where I have to, like, prove that I'm worthy, like, which was like 5 pages of, like, why you want to speak. Like, I mean, it was stupid. So
but I have red hair, so I have
red hair.
I have privileges that aren't available to others.
You do.
No,
but I think suggestions is really helpful.
So I had actually a female reach out to me at the Pearls meeting and ask me about, you know, how did you get to speak and all this? And, like, in my story, you know, like, I don't need to go into what my exact story was, because I think it's getting an opportunity to speak is always, like, kind of like random. And I equate it to being in a band. And when I was in a band, like, before you'd played anywhere, no one wanted you to be able to play. And so you had to, like, look for, like, what was the crappiest venue in Memphis that would let you play, and you'd play there, and you'd play, like, the other crappy venue. And then you would go to the medium venue and say, hey, can we play at your venue? You know, it's like, well, if you bring 50 people, you know, so you play this whole game. And I do think the speaking game is similar to that. And that the first time you speak, you just got to speak somewhere. You just have to start. And so I do think the only pushback I would give to this argument there aren't enough female speakers is, and I'm not saying this is like a foolproof argument, because I think there is some just innate discrimination that's part of it, is for females to find and push for opportunities to speak. I think your conference is important in that it does allow for some light to hit on speakers that could be really great that we wouldn't otherwise know. The only criticism I've ever had of your group when we kind of talked about it was just that if there's a group where all the women go and they're just in there and then not in the co-ed groups, it's sometimes hard to know who's out there that's really exceptional and that has a good story and a good voice. I mean, for this show, trying to consider, well, who am I going to have on here? You know, I'm faced with the same problem where it's like I'm aware of all these men that have done these things and that have spoken constantly and have these stories that I'm like aware of. With females, I'm obviously a little bit less familiar, and maybe that's just my experience, but that's just the reality. It's like, well, I didn't know that this person had this amazing story because I'm just not like surrounded with it. So I guess I would say this is not me mansplaining, or this is not me trying to like tell you how to do this, but I would say to women, like, if you have a voice you want to speak, like, please, like, you know, make it happen.
I had a voice,
and you're still not getting a shot.
And like, I'm still not getting a shot. AAO is not knocking down my door by any stretch of the imagination. You and I talked about that. Like, the AAO wants nothing to do with me. The PCSO, you know, they're a little more progressive. They were like, hey, well, you know, we'll give you the stage. But before,
I don't know if this is going to help your cause either. I don't know.
Probably not, but that's okay. You know, but before Women in Orthodontics was formed, I was like, God, you know, like, we went through a lot with this Great Recession. Not that a ton of people didn't as well, but like, we succeeded. We grew every single year during the Great Recession. Like, we worked so hard. Like, we had stuff to share. And I'm like, and I love to speak. So I would love to speak. And then it was like, well, what am I, you know? And then it was just nothing. And then even when I kind of tried to reach out, and so there's not a lot. Like, you could sit there as a person who's not the admin of a big Facebook group. Like, I had to create my own. My first speaking like thing like was my own luncheon that I created like for my group.
Right.
And so, you know, somebody who's just a member of my group who doesn't have her own, you know, stage would go, well, who am I supposed to reach out to? Who am I supposed to talk to? What am I supposed to find? Like, it's very, very, very hard.
Yeah.
And so hopefully, like, and I always put an open, like, please, like, anybody who wants to speak at the WEO conference, send me a message, tell me what you want to talk about, and I will consider it. And so, you know, I just have an open invitation. And I mean, Nicole Wax she spoke at my conference first. Yeah. And she's kind of getting out there and doing a lot of stuff now. And I'm like super proud of her. I'm so excited for her.
Yeah, there's some people when you hear them speak, you're like, oh man, she's great, or he's great, and like I want to hear them speak more. So I think I would hope this is that, you know, we talked about how you're misunderstood, or there's some people that have a negative opinion of you, perhaps. Some people have a negative opinion of me. I mean, so it's not like anyone who puts themselves out there is at risk of that. Yep. But hopefully
you have to have the courage to be disliked. You know?
Yeah. Well, and everyone, and it doesn't matter who it is. I don't know who like our perceived most liked person is in orthodontics. You know, if that's, I don't want to start naming names, but
it's probably Cole.
It's probably Cole Johnson. Yeah. I guarantee there's some people that don't like Cole. There's some people that don't like Neil. There's some people that don't like, you know, Amanda or you or whomever, right? Okay. You don't name those people. And we go older, David Sarver, like there's people that don't like those people. And it's just because they're choosing not to. But hopefully after spending an hour with you, and we have about 10 minutes left, people are like, oh, I actually kind of like her. Like, this is nice, you know? So I think you're very likable. So, and I think to say this too is that just because you're critical of the AAO on one thing doesn't mean that you're not also a huge supporter of the AAO and very active with the AAO. So I want to be clear with that is that you know, to whatever degree I've been critical of the AAO for this or that or whatever, well, it's not to say that, like, it's the same way I'm with our government. It's like, well, I'm very critical of the government for different things, but it's like I'm not American. It's like I'm not like, you know, pro our country in any way that I'm not pro orthodontist. So there should always be things that we seek to improve. And I think one of those is, well, if someone has a voice and I want to go hear you and I think you'd fill a room, then you should be speaking at that meeting. So it's going to happen now that we've talked about it, now that it's out there in the ether. Let's talk about the AAO. So let's talk about some positive things. Like, what are you doing in AAO leadership right now? Like, what are you up to?
So I'm on the Council on Communications, which was mainly like when I wrote my very first blog, was the big thing that I was critical of the AAO was just sort of what they were doing with their consumer awareness campaign. I was extremely frustrated at that point. I had talked to Chris Varanus a million times about the fact that I was just, my AirPods are going to go out.
Oh,
You told me this was going to happen.
It just makes that noise. Don't worry about it. That means you still got a few
Okay.
more. Yeah, you've got like,
Okay.
we have enough time. Mine made that
Okay.
noise like 5 minutes ago. We're good.
So I talked to Chris Varanus and I'm like, look, like nobody reads magazines anymore. Like these TV ads are lame. Like, and he was just like, no, it's working. It's working. And I'm like, it's not working. And so when the PCSO had their position for the Council on Communications open, I decided to run for it. And I had no idea like what a insane process it is to become a council member. I was like, hey, I'm going to run to be a council member. But I had to go through like phone screenings and like these huge interviews in these groups. I mean, it was insane. So I was lucky enough to be elected on the platform that the current cap sucks and needs to be changed immediately and basically completely scrapped, and everything needs to change or we just need to get rid of it. And luckily, over the past few years, they have scrapped the old campaign. The digital campaign that they're running is extremely effective. Yes, we don't have a $125 million budget like certain other companies, but you know, we're working with the budget that we have. And I mean, like one of our, the Parents Guide to Orthodontics, which is an incredible resource that I had no part of. Jackie Miller did a great job with it. People spend 14 minutes on that page, like at a time, like, which is insane.
Yeah.
In
that
so
world, that's
we
a long
are,
time.
It is insane. So like we are becoming sort of the trusted resource for information about orthodontics. And if that's all that it ends up being, like, that's a great thing, because then we become the trusted, you know, source, which we can actually let them know like what the reality is versus kind of some of these misleading ads that are happening all over the place. So they're running Google ads, you know, they're retargeting, they're doing amazing things. We're constantly working on new blogs. So if you have ideas for blogs or topics that you want covered, please let us know. We're happy to do that. And then our biggest thing right now is just working on member communication. I think that that's something that, you know, we really want to work on, is letting people like know what we're doing. So how do you want to be communicated with by the AAO? Like, I hate getting emails from the AAO, like more than anything in the entire world.
I've unsubscribed for most of them.
Yes, my husband unsubscribes too. And I think I might have unsubscribed because I actually asked Katie, like, hey, did you send information about this? And she was like, oh yeah. And I'm like, oh, I never got it. So, you know, but at the same time, it's like, how do you want to know about the results that are happening with the cap? Like, what can we do? So if you guys have suggestions, we would really appreciate it, that because member communication is really important. And then we just launched our anti-bullying campaign, which is, we changed October from National Orthodontic Health Month to kind of piggyback onto the anti-bullying campaign, but we did it very last minute. And so once again, our communication wasn't fantastic this year, but next year and the year after and the year after, it's just going to build. So please look at the information that we have. Greg Jorgensen did a great job. Jean McGill and I were all on the subcommittee to find a group to partner with. We're partnering with a group called Stand for the Silent. And please look into what the AAO is doing for that. And next year, consider spending the month of October partnering with Stand for the Silent. And if you didn't get to do it this year, maybe make a donation to Stand for the Silent to kind of let them know, hey, we're here to support you and we really appreciate the partnership, because I think it's going to be great in the future. But it was just sort of, we kind of launched it because we had a really hard time finding a group that wanted to partner with us. A lot of the really big anti-bullying groups are like, well, you can give us 150,000 and then we'll talk to you, kind of thing. And you know, we just couldn't do that.
Yeah, no, interesting. I do want to talk about bullying, and we'll kind of wrap for the main interview with this conversation. So there's some posts going around. I saw one with Anil on it who speaks a lot on these topics on mental health and suicide and some of these really dark topics that I'm trying to bring light to, because I think we need to talk about it openly. And you had a testimonial that was attached to yours about how you were bullied in high school or in junior high or whatever it was. I guess kind of quickly, to whatever degree you want to talk about it, like what exactly was your experience? And then I want to talk about how we can help people with those experiences. So something you may not want to talk about exactly.
No, I don't mind talking about it now. I mean, it really did shape who I am as a person. that little girl who was bullied still is with me. Like that
Mm.
insecurity still kind of talks to me like a lot, and I have to kind of like kick it away sometimes. We moved when I was in fourth grade, and we moved from a very middle class neighborhood to like a more upper middle class neighborhood. And I switched schools kind of in the middle of the school year and went into the fourth grade and didn't have the designer jeans and didn't have sort of, my parents had, they had the same amount of money as everybody else, but like, they just, that stuff wasn't important in my old neighborhood. And there
Right.
was a bunch of girls called the group. And I really wanted to be a part of the group because they were just so glamorous and had like the super bangs, the way we all did, way back in the early 80s, and the Guess jeans and all of that kind of stuff that I didn't have. And they tormented me for the next 4 years. They teased me, they talked me behind my back, they tried to, well, I'm going to let you be a member of the group if you do this, this, and this. And then they'll go, no, at the end of it. I would cry all the time when I was home. I just thought I was ugly and horrible. And it pretty much destroyed me. Like, I had no confidence for a very, very, very long time. I'm very sensitive about it in that if my kids are having a hard time at school, I'm like, do you need me to change schools? Because like all I wished in the world was that my parents would have put me in a different school, because those people were just so horrible to me. And so I ended up begging to go to private school for high school. And so I was taken out of that situation. I was totally bullied for being smart. My report card would be stolen out of my backpack and then passed around the bus, and everybody would make fun of me for getting straight A's. I was the nerd, the geek, like ugly, flat, like anything that you can possibly imagine. That from the fourth grade to the eighth grade, I was pretty much told. And, I was able to go to private high school and get away from that a little bit and get to a school where, the culture was expected that you do well in school. And so that was helpful. And things continue to get better over time. But I would say that those 4 years probably, they still, I could probably start to cry about how horrible they were.
Yeah.
So,
and that's a story that I think,
and I can't even imagine if social media existed.
Right. Well, and that was the follow-up to this discussion is that it's not getting any better. I can't remember the exact percentage, and I hate sharing percentages when I don't have the exact in front of me, but the last 10 years, the suicide rate among teens, and especially in girls, has gone up. It's like 60% or something really sickening. And it affects girls a clip that's really scary. And we all know what that is. It's what you described. It's the mean girls thing. But it's also now social media amplifies it, and it gives it more significance, and it gives it more reach, unfortunately. And man, that is a really messed up thing. And so this could be its own entire episode talking about, well, how do you deal with those challenges? But I guess because we're a little short on time, what can we do as orthodontists? What do you do as an orthodontist to help kids with bullying? Because we see it every day. You see kids that they're going through this kind of crap. And man, you just want to hug them and help them. But, what can you do tangibly?
I think the thing is like, you can try to fix their teeth, but in kids that are bullied, like, you can fix their teeth, but they're just going to tease them about something else. If they're sort of the target, I think the biggest thing is just talking to them and connecting with them and making them feel special and making them feel important. For me, going home, I didn't have social media, obviously. So going home and having my parents say, we love you. We think you're beautiful. You're not, horrendously ugly. Like, it's going to get better. Being smart is going to be a good thing. And I didn't believe them at all. Like, and I still have insecurities based on those things, but, I still had loving family to come back to. So I think if you have somebody who's, telling the orthodontist is telling, I think you're a cool kid, and like, I love your shoes, and I love the way that you talk to me about this, that, and the other thing, and just being really like positive with them. And like hearing that from other people instead of just going change to an upper and eye tie, blah, 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 you know what I mean? Like having those interactions with them can make a huge difference. Like having your team, I talk to them all the time about our team. Like, if I'm running behind and you're sitting there, talk to these kids, like build a relationship with them, send them a cute note, like send them a gift. Like I give my team like $25 a month, like send gifts to people. Like, I don't care who it is. I don't care what it is. Like, go ahead and send presents to people. So if you know that like this 14-year-old has like had all these insecure issues and she was sucking her thumb and then, you know, she stopped sucking her thumb, like give her something for that, like praise them and, you know, make it a positive environment so they feel like they're, you know, that our arms are, you know, around them, holding them.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Which is, it's one of the things I love the most about orthodontics is that you can help shape self-esteem in teenagers by making their smile look better. That's part of it. But I think there's a deeper level, which is, it's the craziest thing is that they may have parents that really do affirm them and tell them they're proud of them and they love them and they're, you know, but as a teenager, you're like, well, you know, you don't trust that, but you might trust your orthodontist, your orthodontic assistant. And so it's a really special privilege that we have and that we really need to, we need to do that. We need to spend a little bit extra each day to help kids that are going through some really difficult things. And that's the one thing I always say to my team is you never know what someone is going through that's coming in our office. And we have a unique opportunity to make this potentially the best day of their entire week. And there's this little moment in our office. So, all right, let's go to the TDO top 10. This has been top 5, not 10. You're like 10. You've been fantastic.
Oh my God. Okay.
You're getting a little tired. This has been fantastic. I really, this has been awesome. So I'm very excited. Real quick, lightning round. If you weren't an orthodontist, Courtney, what would you be?
Dermatologist.
Oh, that's a good answer. That's actually the answer I usually give. It had to be something, I always say, I joke, it had to be something easy. You know, I can't work too hard. But dermatology is hard to get into, you know?
It's hard to get into, but like some of those skin diseases. So like, yeah, I'm like a major like picker with my kids, which I know you're not supposed to do or whatever. But like, I think some of those skin diseases are like so interesting that when we learned about them in pathology and stuff. So I definitely would have been a dermatologist.
Well, I had a dermatology resident who was in for a consult. She said I had type 1 skin. And I was like, is that the worst type? And she was like, yes. So I need to be wearing
thank you.
I need to be wearing sunscreen right now, apparently. So
well, they're making a killing out here in Phoenix, let me tell you.
I'm sure they are, yeah. In 2 to 3 words, what's your favorite thing about being an orthodontist?
Fun every day and flexibility in my schedule.
Yeah, great. What's one thing you wish you'd known sooner as a resident?
Like I talked before, more about running a business.
Yeah, sure. Definitely. Who is your biggest influence and why?
I would say my dad is probably one of my biggest influences. My husband is a huge influence as well. Like my dad growing up, and then my husband currently. My dad was a farmer, owned a small business, taught me a ton about business, still does, still asks me all the time. And then my husband to always like push me to do better and to try to achieve more and to reach for higher goals.
That's great. And then what do you want to be remembered by? Like, what do you want your legacy to be?
You know, Lance made it really hard when he was talking about legacy.
Ignore Lance and his cynical
self. You know, he made it so hard. I mean, my legacy, women in orthodontics is my legacy. And so my legacy, I hope, is that, you know, women, you'll have a ton of female speakers out there. You will have a ton of great female orthodontic leaders out there. And I may not personally be remembered for, you know, trying to work on that, but I hope my legacy is just empowering women to do whatever they choose to do.
Sure. Right on. Awesome. Great answers. My headphones are telling me they're making the sad
mine have already made the same noise
multiple times. So we'll see. They may cut off, and if they do, I've got my other headphones ready. But I want to close with this to say that Courtney, thank you so much for taking the time to be on this. You were fantastic. We're going to clap it up for you. For our audience, if we could hear them, they would be clapping right now. You can catch Courtney in person. The real Courtney at 2 upcoming events, as we alluded to earlier, the Women in Orthodontics Conference, January 24th and 25th in Scottsdale, Arizona. You can still register at www.wioconference.com, wioconference.com. She'll also be at the Michigan Association of Orthodontists meeting. This is March 13th, 2020. In Ann Arbor. That sounds good. And you can come see me. You can come see me speak as well. I'll be at the SAO SWSO meeting. This is in Orlando, Friday, November 15th. It's coming up, 8 a.m. I'll be talking on social media if you want to hear that. I want to thank everyone that listens to this on Apple Podcasts. If you could go there and subscribe and give us a 5-star review for this wonderful interview that happened tonight, that would be amazing. We'd appreciate that. I'm going to return sometime in November. I work one episode at a time, so I don't know exactly what weekend this will end up being. But I'm going to be with the master of TikTok. He did not ask me to say that. He's probably going to be embarrassed that I use that. And Instagram, Grant Collins. He's a good friend of mine. And I'm very excited about that. But for tonight, I'm still focused on Courtney and how great this was. And I hope this was helpful for a lot of people. I hope people enjoyed it. Thanks again for having, taking the time to do this. Thanks to Matt for running the master computer back in the other room. What's up, Matt? And from all of us at the Digital Orthodontist Live, I'm Dr. Kyle Fagla signing off. You guys, you're great. Have an awesome Sunday night. Have a great week.
Thank you.
It's going to be a good week. I'm working 3 days this week, which is always a pleasure. I'm off Thursday, Friday, and Monday.
Nice.
Amazing. I might do something fun. I don't know. So anyway, Courtney, have a good night. Thanks, everybody. We will see you in a couple of weeks, okay? Peace.